There is no room. There is no people in the room. No people in the room. People. Okay, we should start now. It's not connected. Okay. It's a bit here. Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. This is the role meeting, but yeah, we are going to wait like 5 minutes until people arrive a bit. There are presenters that are missing, but then. Okay, thank you. Please sign the blue sheets. No,
Well, this is a big meeting.
Yeah, it should be. Hi, Michael.
It's a room with no tables.
No tables.
He goes away. No table, goes away.
Thank you very much to Dominic for being the minute taker and Michael for being the JavaScriber. Thank you, guys.
You have your unusual fan groups. Wow. Assume everyone just got late today.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael.
All right, so it's remote.
Hi, Pascal.
Your remote speak out. Did you get my correction? I am
Yes.
coming.
I really was not clear.
I really typed it completely wrong.
And I'm French. It's all that, and I was like, wow.
The stupid double negative in the past.
So can I introduce Lee? Michael?
Which one?
This is Lee Chang.
This is
Oh,
success.
Hello.
he's working with Cisco and he's doing the repo implementation.
Oh, cool.
So this next speaker, this is Lee.
Are you going to put it over ACP as well?
No,
For Anima? No,
it's already done. It was a different team.
I know, but
It was a team in India.
but I think you lost the cover.
Yes, we kind of the project got stalled too much when Michael left.
Yeah, no.
Michael left because the project was stalled. The project was
I thought you
So
were
some, it's always like that. You do a great thing, and then you have some VP just drops by.
kills you.
He just doesn't know what he's talking about. He says, "Well, I pick that, I drop that." It's the most stupid
Some of it's
thing.
arbitrary.
That happens to us in a long time. So now in data centers, if we add it, it will be better.
Thank you, Pascal.
Want me to keep it?
Okay,
Yeah,
yes,
maybe
please.
that will be nice if people passing, and then maybe get shy passing the influence.
Right now there are 5 names, and I see 8. So there's no. So 9. 10. Very well.
Okay. We're starting 1 minute. We're starting 1 minute or 2 minutes. 1 minute. 1 minute.
Tried
Two
pants
minutes.
yesterday, but it was too hot.
I'm actually setting my
So I thought if I'm too cold, then I'll be too cold. And I'll throw pants.
Yes. That's it. I can
Pulse width.
I can
Pulse width modulate my temperature.
I can tune, you know. That's the cool thing about this jacket is it can be very light if you open it. It's very light.
How does it feel? Oh, like it.
I'm not alone, I'm with you.
With no direction. With no direction.
That's true, because hopefully it sounds American.
What is intended and what
direction is.
He posted one first time
Direction is
results of report simulations.
Yeah.
As he intends to run that simulation on mission or how
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe, does he want to say maybe he wants, maybe he can tell us during other business?
draft status. I think the chat will ask the question.
Okay, we start? Okay, good morning, everyone. This is our meeting. Thank you for being here. We are going to start our meeting. So please aware that the meetings go under not well. Read it carefully. We are not going to read it here. Okay, this is the meeting material. Thank you again to Dominic and Michael for helping us. Please sign the blue sheets. Okay, this is our agenda. Do we have comments? We are going to have Raul remotely, but he is not going to be able to use video. So we are going to have it only in audio mode, but he is going to be online.
Actually, it's going to be presenting, Thomas, right? Yes, Lee is going to present, turn on.
Okay, okay, great. Thank you.
Raoul knows that? Oh, sorry, I misunderstood.
No,
It's not
Raúl present more.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, this is our milestones. Do we have green, all the colors here? We have some delays, but we're going to work on that, hopefully. Some,
Quite successful.
yeah.
3 drafts which have gone past the AD and is an IESG treatment. With the use of RPL info actually being in the last stage.
Yeah.
You just have to put the points and the commas in and all that. So very good, congratulations. But we will really applaud when the numbers are distributed. Okay?
Yeah.
It'll never happen.
Yeah, I know. It's tough.
The fragmentation started 10 years ago, right?
Okay.
It seems like we're creating some record for number of highest iteration count.
Oh no, go to IPY. 40 to 50 personal submission plus 40 to 50. Let's walk you back. It's
Could we
like
have
49 probably.
Go
right
to
now.
mine if you want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly. Thanks for reminding me.
Maybe they will invent
The
this
file is
fragmentation.
over there.
We have one here.
IPY
Okay.
is the best chance we ever had to go through the job.
Do we have comments about the milestones? So we have several documents that are belong to the working group, but they are expired. So it would be nice if they can resuscitate, put alive again some way. Like, yeah, they're going to talk about that.
Yes, especially for the MIP young model. I'm still looking forward to some people who may comment on that. And once that is done, we can put it forward because it's not really a complex document. And reading it is not too complex. It will take you a quarter of an hour. You point out 2 mistakes and that will be it. The young model of MIPL, MPL. The question was how we have some drafts which are expired and are not going forward and what is going to happen. And I picked out one draft of which I happen to be an author. And I told them that if there are any reaction on them, and that can be very difficult, I think, then this one they may go forward as well. Okay.
Okay, this is the status of our active internet draft. We're going to have some discussion today. Other ones are on hold. There are some that are going to be continued, like this modification, hopefully. Ah, that's great. Thank you. And yeah, good. Then we have related internet draft. There are two of them. They are going to be discussed today. That we need as well reviews for roll traffic aware. If some volunteer for review, please do it. Okay, this is our open tickets. There are one couple related with the DAO projection. So I think if during the presentation of DAO projection, after the presentation, if we arise those documents, those tickets, I think it's ready for last call. And Pascal, thank you.
So the DAO projection is actually still alive and kicking and progressing. I hope that we're close to last call, but there might be things that we want to add to the document before we actually close it. So the recent changes are related to the encoding, the RFC 8138 encoding and things like that to help implementation. So we give examples. And there was this comment that we got that when we want to have to tell the root that there is an error on a projected route, then it's not obvious from the packet as it stood to differentiate a source route packet, which a normal REPL source route packet, from a projected source route packet. So because there is no state for the projected route in the intermediate node in the source route model. Remember, we started with storing mode, and we added non-storing mode projected routes. In a non-storing mode projected route, you have a source routing header, you follow it, but you have no state in the intermediate node. So when you see the packet, oh, should I report to the source? Should I report to the root? Or is there any other case? Right now, it would be the root anyway, kind of, but in the future support of source routing, it could be anything. So we decided over the mailing list that having a flag to say, hey, it's this type of route, so the error message should be this, was interesting. And so what we did with the latest version is add a flag in the RPI, the hop by hop option. And well, that was fine, but that means updating RFC 8138 to indicate this flag, right? And actually, as we went through that, we realized that most of what you find today in the RPI is not useful in a projected route, because, for instance, the flags that are used for loop avoidance go away because there's no concept of up and down. So we went through the exercise of actually defining a new format for RFC 8138 for compressing the RPI when it's being used in the context of projected routes. So it's actually smaller, right? And it can contain this flag that we're about. So that's the biggest change we made. So here is the flag in the non-compressed format, basically extending RFC 6553. And I see Michael at the mic. Do you have a question right now, Michael? I'll just...
So that's really interesting that what you just said, so you've extended it, we have the uncompressed format, but then in the process of trying to compress it, you've discovered additional efficiencies, is what I understood you to say.
In the compression format, yes. So,
and does that apply to just projected routes?
Yes.
Or all uses?
Just projected.
Just projected. So basically you have a different compression format for the projected route for this thing. That sounds cool. Okay.
And actually, if you look deeper, in this case, the RPI is actually elective. Because if you ignore it, that doesn't change the way you route the packet. It's just if you're interested in it if you throw an error, basically. So the forwarding would work without understanding that field, meaning that normal RPI is not elective. You have to understand it. But this one is elective. And that's a cool thing, because if you have an old implementation which can forward along the source route path, right, and does everything as it did before, well, the error will still go to the root. It's going to be the wrong error code, but you still will go to the root and you still will get an error, meaning that it's okay if it ignores. And the way we built the elective and mandatory compression formats makes it so that an old implementation will actually let an ERPI through. It will just ignore it. So we are backward compatible. That's kind of cool. If we had to change a mandatory format, then we would have a flag day problem again. But so we basically introduce a new INR entry for an elective RPI this time. That's why we call it RPI. And then we provide well, first the format is like this. We pick the same type. If you looked at the way we did F138, we actually avoided overlapping the types in elective and mandatory, meaning that the number 5, which is the RPI in critical, can be used also in elective for also RPI, right? So not type 5 in elective and critical will both be RPI, which is kind of cool. So it's pretty much why we did not match at the time, because we thought that maybe this would happen, and it actually does now. The formats of doing of the packet being source route from a source which is not the root to a destination which is not the root either was never used before, because for now, till now, the source routing was always coming from the root. So there is an optimization in the IP to IP when the root is the source of the destination. In this case, it's neither, but 8138 was sought for it, even if we never used it before. So I give an example of that format. And actually, we also retrofitted an example similar to that in use of report info. Okay, question.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Right. So, Pascal, you just mentioned a couple of slides before that the packet won't go up and down, but that is true only for the source routed projected routes, right? I mean, it's not true for storing mode projected DAOs. Well, so are you saying that the compression?
Yes, it is, because the path that the storing mode injects doesn't have to be along the DODAG. It can be any path, right? I mean, usually we give example where the storing path is a compression of a non-storing path just to reduce the number of entries in the routing header. Doesn't have to be so. If the root is capable of injecting a non-storing path in the network, it's also capable of injecting a storing path in the network. It doesn't have to be along the DODAG. It can be anything. So once you're in a projected route, you can never go out of it, because you may create a loop. So the bottom line is, there is no up and down. There's just this path. You follow it or you die.
But you just mentioned that there is a possibility of creating a loop with storing mode of operation for even in
there is a possibility.
Right.
There is a possibility. We have text on that, and maybe it can be improved. But the bits as they existed don't help.
Okay.
Right. So we have ample text, but the bits rely on the fact that you understand the DODAG, and you understand that the packet that went down can never go up again. But here, you don't have that concept, because the routes can be in any direction. There is no concept of up and down. You're swimming in the sea. You don't know where the bottom and the top are.
Okay.
So you can't choose the bits down. We are trying to avoid loops with all sorts of things, but basically the flags don't help. So here is the format actually that we end up with if you have 8138 in place between a source and a destination. So what's interesting, 8138 is supposed to be equivalent to IPv6. It's just another encoding of the same thing. Now, the way it's encoded is usually that you place all the destination information in the front. So if you have one destination, it's the first thing that you have. If you have a routing header, meaning that you have a series of destinations, they are all placed in the front one after the other, which is very different from the normal way of IPv6, where you have the first destination in the IP header and then the source route header somewhere else, and you have to do swapping games, etc. All this is gone when you use the 8138 format. So you start with the routing, the destinations. Usually you have either the destinations, which means you come from the root and you go down, or you have the encapsulator, which then you go up, and the encapsulator is not the root. But if the encapsulator is the root, it's elided. Well, in this case, you have both the destination of the IP in IP and the source, because neither are the roots, so neither is elided. Right? So it's completely compatible with 8138. It's just that maybe people never coded for that. Because if you did the minimal code for exactly what you needed for classical REPL, where the source route header is always coming from the root, then you never had an encapsulator that I have in blue here in your packets. Now you do, because the source is not the root. So we still have a number of discussions. That's when I'm wondering whether now is the time for workgroup last call or not. I really want to close this document. I really want to finish it. We want to implement it. But there's one big question is we never really solved, is how does the root know about the topology? What do? We said, oh, it's not this spec, right? But we don't have, nobody started the other spec which says how that happens. So right now we know how to project a route, we don't know how to compute it. And I mean, either we start a draft and then we hint for 2-3 years, or we just add an option in that one so that the root knows. So maybe this one could be the vessel for, if we can find a minimal way to provide topology information to the root, maybe we could package that option into this document. That's the question I'm asking to the group here.
I agree with that.
You agree?
I mean, yeah.
Because basically what we have today, right, we have storing mode, non-storing mode. In non-storing mode, the root has most of the information already. It has all the DODAG, right? But if you want to do a route east-west, well, maybe it's going to be not too optimized because you only see the DODAG. So you only see links in the DODAG, the parent to child. What you would like to see is a bit more of sibling routes. So what you really need is something like the target option. Well, you have the target option, that's me. And then you have the transit option, which is my parents. And I have a list of transit options. So I tell the root, here are my parents. Mm-hmm. What I would like to tell the root is, here are my siblings, right? So we could define a sibling option in like 30 lines of text in this spec. Or we try our new RFC, which will take 2 years. So if you're inclined of doing that, if the group says, hey, do it, let's just propose an option, put it in that spec.
Propose the option.
Yes? Good. I'm buying that.
There are comments about that?
Any issue? Any issue with this? Okay, so next gen we'll have it.
We can just put the option and go to the working group with the.
Oh yeah, that's the usual way, right?
Yeah.
I will propose a format on the mailing list, and I will ask feedback for what goes in it, what doesn't go in it, blah blah blah, and then I'll push new version of the draft.
Yeah, could you add as well a paragraph with the other options, like doing it like a separate, like a note? This could be as well done in another RFC, or
in the mail, you mean, or in the spec? In the spec, it's
well in the email.
Okay. I first confirm with the mail. I propose the option in the mail, and then if I get positive feedback and no negative feedback, blah blah blah, publish. Yeah. Anyway, we need to discuss it. Yes, let's do that. Second thing is we still need more capabilities. So the node can express that it can do either of those things. So for instance, how much memory do I have? How many storing, non-storing routes can I store in my node? Right. So the root does not overload my node with too many routes. We don't have right now any way of doing it. The logical way is to provide a map using Raoult's draft. The only problem with that is that Raoult's draft is not yet an RFC, and so we will have a dependency on it. What I want to do is use Raoult's draft, refer to it, And so I will ask you to progress files draft as soon as you can, right? That's pretty much what goes with it, because it will hold this one. Or if you have a better way, we can also put some options in there which would be very specific to this and not use Raws draft. That's the alternate.
No, I think if the mob of draft define the capabilities, we should use that, right? So, right?
I mean, the map extension is not a big draft. It's just a format that can be extensible. I mean, why don't we progress it?
Yeah, yes? Raul is going to talk about that today. So
yeah, so I hope, Raul, that you tell us that you're ready to publish. Yes, then the draft goes through something very complex, which is what happens if you want to, as opposed to have a full path that is completely established in one shot. How do you stitch path? Well, that's still okay, but how do you, for instance, have a loose source route with storing in between, right? Because told you, if you start using projected route, you cannot go away and use the normal DAG because it could take you back earlier in the projected route. Mm-hmm. You may create loops, right? That's where loops come from. So if you start entering this topology, this virtual topology that is the projected route, you must follow it to the end. That's how you avoid loops. Now, the root can say, hey, I can do a non-storing path from A to B, and then down from B to C or B to D, I can have two other projected routes, and you concatenate them. As long as you're doing that, you're probably loopless. But if you start doing things like, oh, I'm stitching storing and non-storing route, etc., then if some nodes in the middle lose some state, you're dead. So how far do we want to go with this? Do we want to say, I placed some rules already to limit the way you could play with those stacks. I would like people to review that. I mean, I think that's the most critical piece in this draft is loop avoidance, right? Which protection, which limitation, how do we make things simple so that we know there won't be loops, but at the same time, we limit the capabilities of the protocol, right? So that needs to be well thought. People need to look at that. If there is only one thing you need to look at is this, right?
Okay, we are going to create a ticket for that, so it's well documented as well.
And then there is all the compression games. Do we want to do the compression in that? It's true for the VIA option. It's true for anything in REPL. Right now, we have compressed the data plane. We have not compressed the control plane. And George just wants to speak about that.
Yeah, about the last point, actually.
George.
Yeah, George from EMT Atlantic. About the REPL control plane compression, we will need in our draft as well.
We need anyway a draft on REPL compression. I don't understand that we don't have it right now. I thought that we would do it in the coming years right after REPL. It never came.
Yeah, exactly.
Now we have 8138. So we are in a very different situation than we were in 2007, 2010. We have 8138. So we already have the format for the compressing the routes. So why don't we just express the VIA option already in the 8138 format, meaning that when you build a packet natively in 8138, you just have to take this and put it in your packet. So it would make the implementation much easier if the format that we have here is the native format in which they will actually write the packet. Makes our control smaller and makes the implementation easier. So, I mean, right now, I just wanted to say, here is what's in there. It's a more logical representation. But I think when we go to bits and bytes, I mean, it's very easy for me to express this same spec with a much smaller VIA option, just because it's already compressed in 8138. Opinions? But that means people use 8138 mostly. It would be stupid not to.
This is Peter van der Stok. I really want to draft. I mean, you have been talking about it, you have changed it, rechanged it. I mean, and now we seem to converge, which is very nice. But I really want to get it fixed. So if there are additions which can be actually exported to other documents. And if this can be simplified and such that additions can be done in other documents, I would certainly prefer, so that this document is the standard way where you can, this is the base document in which you can show that we have these alternative routes. And if there are any additions or optimizations, then this document is the reference and you can go forward. So then we can publish this document without to, because if you look at this list, we are not going to have working group last call before November.
Are you speaking as a voting group channel?
No, I speak with my cap off. Yeah.
Oh, I can disagree then.
You can ignore it.
Okay. I think there is a minimum set that we need to ship. Otherwise, it makes no sense. We'll need other RFCs anyway, and then we delay the implementation a lot more than we would, right? So there is a balance here. There's nothing obvious, I'm saying.
But okay, what I understood is that that Michael Richardson here, that the route, the DAO protection mechanism is probably not functional without some of these additions. Is that what I really
yes,
think
that's
I
the point.
understood? Is that we really can't have an implementation without these other bits. And so I'm sympathetic to what Peter suggested in general, but I think that it needs to be in one place for an implementer to say, do all of this.
But there is not so much, Peter. It's not like it's an open book, right? I try to really list what's important.
I actually don't think it matters whether you have one document or four. And it's the complex. In fact, it's probably worse for the IESG review if you have four, because they'll have to review it as a group anyway to understand it, and they don't, unless they all just pass.
And they don't want too many RFCs coming out of the group, right?
Yeah.
They're saying, "Hey, what load are you pushing on us?"
Yeah. So the yeah.
We are not pushing a lot.
Oh, we are actually. I do think that, we do have quite an interesting number of specs out of this group. Actually, it's a productive one.
The problem we have with our documents is they're interesting, and the IESG is attracted to interesting, shiny objects.
Good.
So if we make our documents more boring, then they will just go check.
Okay. So guess what, Peter? I'll try to put some more energy on this one to get those things solved. There is one I did not mention. I mentioned stitching, right? But think about it for just a second. We are not, if we just push serial path A, B, C, D in the network, and that's it, it will never work, because the route can be very far away from the route, and the route cannot react instantly to any problem along that path. So when we'll be effectively using this spec to lay out routes, it's going to be DODAG. It won't be A, B, C, D. It's going to be A, B or C, then maybe B to C, then C to D, E, C to whatever. It's going to be a DODAG. It's going to be a complex thing. That's why we need to stitch stuff, right? I have to very validate that the way we express things today allows us to stitch things in the right fashion, because it's not viable otherwise. A linear path is okay in the TE world where you have wires and very reliable links, but it's not viable in a wireless mesh, which is quite large. We build meshes of 2,000, 3,000 nodes, and sometimes 10 to 20 hops, and we deploy them and they work. But if you have to push a storing mode or non-storing mode projected route 10, 20 hops away, and then there is a glitch on one of those links, you can't go tell the route, please solve this problem for me. You have to separate the forwarding from the routing. What belongs to the routing is those gray lines that it monitors statistically. And I understand this gray line is a bit more gray, and this one's a bit more black, this one's a bit more white. Let me build you some redundancy so you have enough redundancy at all times to get packet from A to B, and the rest is not my problem. That's what the routing will do. That's what the DAO projection will do. What the forwarding will do is use DLIP or things like that to understand what the actual state of those links is, to use this DODAG between A and B. It's usually 2-3 hops, right? It's not 4. but it's multiple possibilities. And in runtime, I have to look at my packet and say, hey, what kind of redundancy do I want to use in this packet? And to do that, I need to very well understand the state of all those hops, which means that I have something in the forwarding plane which is just happening in that little DODAG that the route projection has built for me, and that lets me use it optimally so I get my packets through. If I flood the DODAG, I'm wasting energy. So I need to use it wisely. And that's when all the information I can get, actually, it's good that you're in the Rundstedt, but it's actually this kind of information, package in OAM, feedback to the source routing over the DODAG. That's what will save the day, right? So we basically need the source. In non-storing, we need the source to be able to know exactly what are the possibilities in this DODAG. So it's about getting through information and stitching it. So you need to be able to correlate multiple segments and make that a DODAG. Right now, the draft just gives you segments, not the full DAG. So we need to make sure that we can express that. I hope I was clear. Maybe not. Okay, and that's it for me. So yes, we have suggestions here. So role is the place to do the slow piece, right? How do you do this gray DODAG? And I'm trying to create a new working group called RAW, for Reliable, Available, Wireless, which is the other piece of that story. I have this local DODAG. How do I use it? It's not a routing problem anymore. It's a forwarding problem. It's about OAM. It's about link information, instant reaction to events. So that's what RAW is about. If you're interested in RAW, then we have a meeting on Thursday morning.
Pascal?
That's pretty much it.
Sorry, that's a side meeting?
That's a side meeting.
RAW.
Reliable and Available Wireless. It's how you have
Okay.
It used to be PAR.
Yes.
But the ISG told us that PAR looks like PARS, which was white space.
Yes.
And so this is white but not space. So that's it for this one. Do you have any question?
I have a question.
Yes,
Li Zhao from Cisco. And we know that project DAO is very useful for the P2P case. But we have a case that is...
More close to the mic, please.
Too far from the mic.
Okay. Li Zhao from Cisco. My question is, can we define a kind of query PDAO from root? That means if the node need to search the PDAO road from road, we need to provide a mechanism.
Okay. So if I can reformulate what I understand, my understanding of the question is basically who gets to tell the root that there is a need to establish a path between A and B, and what are the properties of that path, the amount of redundancy, the kind of reliability you want to obtain, basically what we call the traffic specifications in DetNet. And in the one hand, it could be some application somewhere in the cloud, but on the other hand, it could be a node in the network which decides it wants to talk to another node, in which case we need signaling from that node to tell the root, please, I'm A and I want a projected route to B.
Yes.
Right, and so we don't have signaling for that. It would be like a multi-hop this or something, where the node could tell, hey, Mr. Root, I want a projected DAO to B. Is it something we want to include in this document? So it was not in my list. That's just Lee's proposal, Lee's question. So I guess it comes from operational requirements, right?
Yes.
It's something we want in the field. Yeah. So it seems there is a need for support for the host. Tell the root, I want to talk to Mr. B. So is it? I'm sorry, but now again we are pushing some new stuff in, which is so. Do we want this? Do we want?
Thank you, Pascal. Please check the open tickets related with this DAO projection draft, and let us know if it's addressed or we should add more information.
I think it's not fully addressed. I will.
Okay. Yeah.
A small question. How do you see the progress now? Will you first do the modifications which have been proposed here and people think, and then you publish it, and then we start asking for more reviews? Is that the procedure? Okay.
Yes, I just want to know, maybe Lee, you can post to the mailing list a proposal like to use a dis or something like that, or it's probably something like it's a message that has to go all the way to the root and ask for a path with certain characteristics, and you need to be able to express those characteristics. What I call a T-spec is really what in .NET we say we want this reliability. So the root has to translate that. I can build a DAG which is all those shades of gray. If I want a reliability of 5 nines, that means I need 5 paths or something like that. I don't know, with so much PRE. So packet reliability, replication elimination type of games, all across. It really depends on the quality that you want to obtain, and the root cannot compute a route if it doesn't know the result that you want, like latency, reliability. You need some specifications like that. Routing to the leaf. So this one is easier because you need to understand the PDAO is a big thing, right? It's okay. It's a lot of work. It's taken time. It's a big thing. It's just it's like AODV, right? It's a new way in REPL. We are using SDN, so it's normal that it takes time and we have to think it through because it's a big thing. Now the leaves, the unaware leaves, is a small thing. We have created 8505.
Sorry, the aware leaf was want to be presented by.
No, that's the one that you have at the end of the agenda. That's the turn on 8138.
Okay. But in the agenda is at the end.
Yes, Lee's at the end.
Okay.
So 6-loop built this whole series of draft, and what we're interested in right now is 8505. 8505 is a host-to-router interface whereby a host registers to a router and asks for some services. And the service can be routing, can be ND proxy, could be anything else because it's extensible. So right now it was expressly designed for use case like REPL. So when we wrote 8505, we made sure that what REPL needs can be actually expressed with R505, right? But so now 8505 lets the host tell the REPL router, here's what I want, in a way that the REPL router can turn it into REPL. The cool thing with that is if you're a low power device, you don't have to do 6-LOPAD ND, which goes all the way to the 6LBR, and then DAO, which goes also all the way to the root. There's just one of those two flows that happens. So you divide the amount of traffic between the low power node and the router, you divide it by 2. And you also divide by 2 the traffic along the mesh because you don't have the DARDAC on the one hand and the DAO in the other. Actually, the draft allows to make it so that just sending the DAO regenerates the DARDAC at the root, dividing the traffic by 2. So good for low power, good for the mesh. Okay, so that's pretty much what this draft does. In the future, as you can see, we also have the address protection ND, which allows us to prove the ownership of an address. Right now it's done on the ND side, it's not done on the REPL side. Meaning that if you have access to the REPL network, you don't have zero-touch properties whereby you could only inject an address if you own it. Right now, as soon as you get access to the REPL network, you can send a DAO, you can send any DAO, meaning that you can claim you're anyone, right? So it's the old way, it's before zero trust, but now we're in the zero trust world. APND gives zero trust on the ND level, and in the future, I hope we extend it to the REPL level, that we cannot inject an address that is not owned, basically. So, but that's for the future. For now, unaware leaf is very simple, just covers 8505. Translate that into REPL, saves half of the traffic, and allows leaves that don't support REPL at all. They have no knowledge of REPL. That's what it's for. So that's pretty much the expectation that we're looking at. So like I said, the EDA exchange DARDAC is now regenerated at the root, so we don't have to have both flows across the network. The DAO is used as keep alive. And the draft enables to separate the REPL root and the 6LBR. Most of the case, they will be the same, but we actually, I thought, at first I thought I would remove the section which allows it, and then I got use cases where it actually happens. So I finally let it the way it is. There is a limitation to it, and the limitation is that in the DAO that is used to regenerate the Dardak, there is no concept of the token, what we call now the rover in 8505, which used to be the MAC address. So normally when you build a Dardak, you need to place all the fields which were in the hero option, including this unique ID that is the rover. But since we don't have it in REPL, we cannot actually regenerate it at the root. So right now we say something weird like, you just fill it to 0 and it can only be a refresher. You know, an improvement we could do is to have something to place it in the DAO. So it's just a change that we could be making.
One question. There was a last IETF, I think, the discussion about to merge, like
Yes.
CSLBR.
So I thought we would merge. We said we
Yeah.
would, but then since then there were use cases that I was told about use cases and just found some where we don't want to merge. It's actually separate. An example of that is if you have a backbone and the 6LBR is common to all the mesh. So the 6LBR now is a central guy covering the whole backbone. And the root is still the root of one DODAC.
Yes.
They're separate.
Okay, thank you.
So for cases like that, and then there is also another case where you actually translate the Dardak into DHCP. So if you actually have a DHCP server, you could use that to at least refresh the DHCP. So what you do is you get your address from DHCP first, but all the renew is actually done this way. So instead of doing a Dardak, you do a DHCP renew. And actually there are field deployments which use DHCP like ours, to be honest. So it's out of scope of this spec, but you can actually do a DHCP renew as opposed to a Dardak.
Okay.
So these are two use cases where you still need to split. So kept it, finally did not remove it, but for the strict operation of that, if we really want to do it well, it would be better to place the rover field in REPL. And that will be useful. I just told you, hey, soon we will want to do zero touch. We will want to be able to authenticate that the address is owned as you inject it in REPL. And to do that, you will need the rover field anyway, right? So I'm tempted to ask, hey, why don't we already put the rover field in the DAO right now? So next we'll be able to secure the injection of a DAO, because that's the tool to secure it. I'm open to either way. Today, the refresher of the Dardak has the field set to 0. I'm not seeing any opinion. I don't think people have time to think about that. So, but that's pretty much the only improvement they can think of in this draft. Changing the DAO to place the rover from 6LoWPAN into REPL, so that we can do this refresh up there. And there is nothing much. I added text which was kind of an obvious that if the leaf does not support 8138 and it's not supposed to, then the IP and IP goes to the parent. How do you know that the IP and IP goes to the parent? It's because the route is injected with an E bit, which means external in REPL. So basically, if the root sees the E bit set in the DAO, then it needs to IP and IP to the parent, not to the node.
Thank you, Pascal. Comments? Who have read the draft?
Who have read? No? So I'm disappointed. It's not a big draft, right?
Yeah, small one.
So, yes? Sorry? Like 3?
2.
3?
4. But we have the
4? Hey, Lee, raise your hand, right? You did, right? So.
Okay.
So the only question really is, do we want to change the DAO format or to put an option for the DAO format in this spec so we can carry the ERO. And if we do that, then we can redo the proxy DARDAC from the root to the SXLBR properly.
Could you put that into the mailing list,
Yes.
please? So we get the discussion?
Yep.
Thank you.
So I will do unless I forget, right? So if it's in the minutes.
I will remember.
Yes, yes. Or if you have an issue, and then I will go back and go through all the issues.
I will.
If you can make that an issue,
Yes,
it's
of
perfect.
course, I will.
The ticket. And
So who is willing to review the draft, please? Thank you, Michael. Who else? Or we are going to ask in the mailing list.
so I'm looking at this slide I made because there were questions to the list. So we get this question on the mailing list whether we should support Meeple as well. And well, I'm not too keen, to be honest, because that's completely a new spec. But I'm open to arguments on that because the clients could also, Peter, they could also be Meeple unaware, kind of, right? So do we need to do the same game for Meeple unaware leaves? What is there to be done? And is it the same document? Part of the Meeple prime is the hop by hop cannot be ignored either, right? So we have the same prime for Meeple as we did with the REPL hop by hop. You have to translate it into something can be ignored and blah, blah, blah.
Michael, I feel like Meeple is so much less well understood as a group and as implementers that I wouldn't want to put it in the same document for that reason, because I think we won't get what we need. I'm actually sure that it's as big a problem as for unicast, because the biggest problem we have in unicast is that with the unaware leaves is that we don't know where what the hop before them is. Right? If we could know reliably what the hop before them was, then we would be able to put all these artifacts addressed to them and they could be removed and the unaware leave just works, right? In unicast, right? The problem is we don't know that, which is the issue. And learning that is hard and compensating for it is hard.
This is why I want to change the hop by hop option to 2D. So
Sure.
you actually deliver the Meeple packet to everybody.
Well, so I agree with you. That helps. But I'm also suggesting that for some unaware leaves that need to do Meeple, I'm actually finding that a real stretch to conceive of, but maybe someone has a use case, okay?
To be honest, I'm exactly the same place.
Pardon me?
As you. I completely agree.
Right.
Personally, right.
So I'm thinking about some really sleepy node, window break sensor or something like that, that is using Meeple to, I don't know what, but the point is that if it's a really sleepy node, something else is going to have to store. So since that thing is storing, and since the Meeple packet is a new packet being sent, we can send it unicast if necessary with whatever else, because there has to be some kind of thing happening there. Yeah. So maybe that there's a bunch of cases that where we think that it's Meeple to the leaf, it doesn't actually have to be. It can be the last hop can be unicast, and therefore we can do whatever we like because it has to be stored anyway. So I would suggest that I don't want to discourage you from writing a document, but I would suggest that we need to actually kind of wait for someone to come up with a real use case or a real situation where this happens. Whereas I feel in the unicast case, we kind of do know what is going on. Maybe Karsten and the core and those people have a real use case that's going to happen, and that would be great. Then we would know what we're dealing with.
Yeah, but okay, what you're telling us so far is there are a lot of unknowns. We need a good description of the prime statement, and then it's probably a separate document. You don't bar the idea of doing it. You just say, not this spec. Let's publish this one. Yes, pretty much. Do you agree with that, Peter? Yeah. Lee?
Actually, this is indeed a requirement from the deep sleep node. That is.
Lee, please. You're supposed to speak your name. So Li Chao.
Yeah, Li Zhao. Linda from Cisco. This is a requirement from deep sleep node, which need to support the unaware RIP and unaware, MIPO. We cannot use unicast to send the multicast packet because it will support. Imagine that if 1,000 of deep sleep node connect to one power node, you need to do firmware upgrade for the deep sleep node. We supposed to use multicast, so it's better to support.
So your deep
MPR.
sleep node actually synchronized to a broadcast schedule, right?
Yes.
That's what they do.
Yeah. So at least we need to support one kind of multicast, whatever MPR or other multicast protocol.
Michael Richards again. So that's wonderful. That's a great use case, and I get what you're saying. But what I'm trying to say is that because the packet going out is different than the packet coming in, and none of those sleeping nodes are expected to relay the node, are they? No, because they're too sleepy to do that. So it seems acceptable that we can send a different set of headers on that multicast because we're not expecting that packet to get relayed again, right?
Yes. Or we can expect them to just ignore the 6D or 2D, right?
Well, that would be what the document would then say, that
Yeah.
we could put it in and they could ignore it, but that requires them to change.
No, if we make it to 2D, we need to change MIPO, right? Because
Right.
it needs
We
to
make
be-
them, we change MIPL, but I'm saying, what I'm trying to say is that if you've got the synchronization, it's happening, and none of the nodes that are expected to receive that message during that wake-up period are expected to relay,
That's true.
then there's no point in putting any headers on. It's just a local multicast. If some of them are going to relay and some of them will not because they're sleepy and they're all waking up at that time, then it makes sense to do that.
In that
Okay.
particular use case, I understand that the unaware leaves are really leaves. It's part of being unaware is being leaves, right? It's kind of, right. So you don't rely. I mean, it's part of the terminology here, right?
Peter van der Stok. No, small remark. I don't think you should do MIPL in this document because it is a completely different protocol with repeaters, etc. So the problem is completely different. So not discuss it here. Other thing I not quite sure. What about trickle? It's not MIPL. It is trickle. It is for the distribution of knowledge through the whole network.
Right, but what I was suggesting, do I need some trickle in this document or what? I mean, I don't see why you're
Are there
bringing trickle.
consequences for trickle? That's one of the things. I'm not aware of it. But
You mean for the meeple story, right?
no, for the trickle. You have the trickle. Okay.
This document, I'm asking, you want me to change this document to say
No.
something about trickle? Oof.
Okay.
I was afraid you wanted me to say something about trickle here. So what? So you want to talk about trickle in another document to solve what?
Not to solve. If you have a MIPL problem, we should look also at the trickle problem
Oh,
and
okay.
not discuss it here. Okay.
Ah,
Fine.
fine,
And I
perfect,
think
yeah.
the whole. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And meeple is interleaved with trickle. Might be so. It's a long consideration. You're telling us basically. It's not just a side effect of this document. So I agree with that. And I think we're through. I hope I was within my time.
That's fine, no problem.
Yeah.
This is your
Yeah.
slide.
So if you see that we are missing something from a plain unaware leaf, now is the right time to say, because I hope we go with this document to last call very soon. The only thing I see missing right now is whether we push the rover in a DAO or not.
Well, we can create a ticket and
Let's create a
because we
ticket on
need
that,
discussion on the mailing
solve
list
it,
and reviews.
and either I do it or not, and then we go.
Yeah, we need reviews in as well. Reviews. We need the reviews.
Yes, obviously,
Yeah.
but that's part of going well for Pascal is to get all those reviews.
Mhm.
Now, if you could find one or two reviewers right now, that would speed the process, right? If you can raise hands, I don't know, maybe.
Okay, not so much people have read this document, but please, who is willing to review? Mike? Pascal, you raised the hand, right? Yes, thank you. Who else?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Unaware leaks.
Yeah.
Not nipple unaware leaks.
No, not Meeple. Not Meeple. Thank you, Pascal, very much. Churches?
Great. So it's George from IETF Atlantic. This is the update from the version 01. So we have the version 04. I will go to the next slide where we have the details. So first of all, many thanks to Dominique, Diego, Raul, and Pascal. So to Dominique and to Diego for their thorough review. So we got a bunch of comments. And then Raul and Pascal for the discussion that we had in the mailing list. So the main changes that we got to 04 is that now we are having the common ancestors defined as objective function in this draft in 3 different patterns. Then we changed the title to reflect the change of these common ancestor objective functions. So we have a new title in this document. Then, so the common ancestor pattern is not anymore as an example in the document, but it is as objective function. So it's a prescriptive. Next thing is, the next big thing that we changed is that we removed any reference that we had about 6 LoRa or 6 LoR. I don't know how to pronounce this. Yeah. Yeah. So 6 LoRs? LoRa. LoRa H. Okay. So we removed, so there's no conflict with this based on the discussion that we had with Pascal, with Dominique about this point. And the third, yeah, there were like many comments on the readability improvement, so we addressed these parts as well. That's are the main changes. And so before asking for the WGLS, if there will be any other, if it's necessary to have any other round of reviews to see about the structure or the new version that we have now as objective function, that will, I do not know. So this is a question to the chairs. Shall we call it now, or you want us to call it in Singapore?
Do you think it's complete, or do you still see problems which are going to have to be solved? You seem rather confident that the thing is rounded, clear, finished.
So there were like 2 things, and now it's the two big things that we solved. The one was the 6 LoR H, and the other one's the objective function to be defined. So we follow the discussion based on the comments, the reviews, and the mailing list. And we do not have any other big issue to go through.
Clemens, Aris?
Hello, everyone. So if something would be helpful if someone could take a look, is actually a bit maybe an editorial issue. So the way we define the objective function is what would be the equivalent of an object-oriented extension of Mr. Hoff. So we took basically every section in the Mr. Hoff RFC, and we said how our objective function is different, because basically it's an extension of Mr. Hoff. So I'm not sure, I haven't done this before, I'm not sure this is the correct or incorrect way to do it. So maybe some feedback on that would be useful.
Thank you, Aris. Who is willing to review that? Pascal, you? Oh, you are the author. Dominique, thank you very much.
It will be quick, Dominique. I mean, everything is the same. It's just changed the structure, actually.
Okay, so going back to Mr. Hoff,
Yes, me too. Remus, I think what you did is exactly okay. I had this same discussion about how the fragmentation updates or does not update existing documents when you say I update and when you say you don't. In this case, you are not updating Mr. Hoff because Mr. Hoff still stands as it is for the use case
Yes.
it has. You're just inheriting from it, meaning
Yes.
that you're using what you don't modify the way it already exists, and then there are things you modify. So I think it's perfectly okay to express it this way, and you don't need to say you update Mr. Hoff. What you can say, you should have a section saying, I'm extending Mr. Hoff, and there are the changes I'm doing on top of it.
This is what we say. This is exactly what we say.
Which is yeah.
This is what we have.
Yeah, and I think it's perfect. Just expressing what we have and making sure everybody agrees. But we are doing the exact same way in other drafts, and it seems to be okay.
Okay, thank you.
This is Dominic. Yeah, just commenting. I looked at the diff, and it's hardly no more than 1 page of difference, so it's pretty easy to read. But the point I wanted to make is that then we have to go back to Mr. Orff to see exactly what additions you're placing on it. That's the most
we make explicit
part.
reference.
No, I'm just saying.
Okay.
You said it's easy. It will be easy. It will be quick. As I said, okay. The changes in your draft are small, but the implications are that you have to go back and read Mr. Hoff again and make sure you understand exactly what they. So a little bit of work still.
Maybe a small remark is on what Pascal was saying before. So since we removed all the references about the compression and the DIO for the 6th floor, so maybe indeed was a good idea of having a new document, maybe how to compress the control plane. Can be another document to work all together, potentially.
Thank you. And so we have 2 reviewers, Dominique and Raul. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks so much,
for
guys.
Volunteer. Yeah.
The rest are just backup slides, but I'm not sure if it's necessary to go through.
Some comments? Questions? Who have read this document? Who have read this document?
Who has implemented the document?
Pardon?
Who has implemented the
We have implemented.
They have it open source.
We have the implementation here.
Yes,
Yeah, we have many research papers. We are even teaching this in the school now.
That's great, yes.
And most RFCs are not that much looked at before the publication.
I know, it's great. It's great work.
No, we did.
Yes,
Yep.
Thank you very much.
So what do we do with this?
So we need 2 of
Okay.
the reviews of Dominique and Raul, and then we can go.
Great. Lovely.
And then we can go to for last call.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Compared to core.
No, we don't compare.
Michael, here, I just have a question for some of the people that have just presented some things. You mentioned you're teaching them? Yeah. So I have a question. I'm not exactly related to the group, but is an IETF interest.
Yeah.
The documents that you're writing, are they being counted by your professional tenure review committees? No. Okay. Just curious if that was something better in your world that not happening in
Yes,
mine.
you can. Yes, please.
I so much concur with Michael. There is a big problem with the relation in IETF and academia is that the RFCs should be counted. Look at Google Scholar, right? It counts patents, it counts documents, the normal publications, and it counts RFCs. All that are valid documents. I mean, we really need to work hard with the academia to get our publications recognized.
Yes, I know. Okay. Thank you, guys. So now we have. No. We're going to forward, sorry.
I don't know if he wants to be or not.
I think he has to leave, right? Wait. Now we have, should we have Raul?
Hello.
Hi, Raul.
Can you
Thank
hear
for
me
joining
okay?
us. Okay.
Right, so I'll start.
Yes, we can hear
I'm
you.
Rahul Jadhav from Huawei Technologies. I'm going to talk about MOP.
Yeah, please
Sure.
speak slowly so we can
Sure.
have good return. Thank you. So just
Will
let
do.
me know and I can advance on
So
the
the talk
slides.
is about, I'm going to talk about MOP extension, which is a pretty straightforward thing to do. The proposition is very straightforward. And the other thing is the capabilities handshake, which in my opinion is a little bit complex, is definitely more complex than MOP extension. Both of the things are handled in the same document. Now, well, the need for MOP extension, the mode of operation extension is quite straightforward. We already have existing drafts which are eager to use new MOPs, and we have already exhausted the existing MOPs. What is an MOP? It specifies, it mandates the primitives to be supported by the 6LR. If a node has to join as a 6LR in the network, it has to support the mode of operation. If it doesn't support the mode of operation, then it can join as a leaf node. It's 3 bits in size and it's already exhausted. You can see in the bottom right hand side that there are existing documents waiting to be using those codes. Next slide, please. Yeah. So the MOP extension option, this is a new option that is introduced. It's a pretty straightforward option. Now, one question here would be the extended MOP value. If you see the number of bits that I've allocated for extended MOP value is quite high. And I am not sure if those many extended MOP values would indeed be required in the future. The reason why I ask is this directly impacts the control overhead of the TIO. So, I am considering maybe shortening the size of this extended MOP value here. If there is any feedback from the working group in this context, I would like to understand. Next slide, please. Yeah, Pascal.
Pascal, thank you.
Yeah, Raoul. I was thinking that usually you've got a type and a subtype. Like sometimes you have something like storing, and then you could have variations of it, right? But right now we kind of have collections of bits, and each one seems to be either or. Like you can't have both. Like you're this, or you're this, or you're that. I want to make sure that we express things in a fashion that you can have this, and that. So you set multiple bits. So there is a main thing and then some options. So just a matter of how we express it. But today, right, all the MOPs are exclusive. That's what I'm saying. You can't have a mix of storing and non-storing. But what we want to extend in the extension, we want to be able to do some mixes. Like I can have a mix of non-storing and projected routes. Just to give you an example, non-storing main routes and projected storing mode routes, or a mix of storing and non-storing projection. I don't know. So we just don't want exclusive.
Right. So
like just
this is exactly what
bits.
I thought about when writing this draft, and that's when I thought about introducing capabilities. So if we have something which goes along with the existing MOP, then we can handle it in the form of capabilities. Is what I was thinking. Does that make sense? I mean, if there are any new set of options that go along with the existing MOP, those could be expressed in the form of capabilities. Is what I'm thinking.
Yes.
Right. So,
you can stay there if you're down to us.
Okay. I think they are both right. Capabilities can be. It's more like I can do that, right? DIO mode of operation is how this network works. It's not that it's capable of doing something. That's the way it works. So I'd like to use the MOP for what the MOP is and say it's a non-storing and it's using projected route storing and non-storing. I don't know. And if the rules are, if you can't do those things, then you don't join this network as a router. You have a leaf at best. There are rules allocated that match this thing. So, capability is different. I can do this. Right. That's nice. Use it or not. And then there is another thing which is needed in in your draft is I can do it, and it's on or it's off. For instance, you're using use of REPL info. Okay, there is a hop by hop. There is a new hop by hop. There is this new flag in the DIO which says, hey, it's on or it's off. It's controlled on off by the root. But what did the node receive it? Did the node apply it? So the node has to be capable of supporting the new hop by hop. That's one thing. So it's a capability. And then it has, okay, I'm using it right now. So I understood what the root told me and I switched it on, which is next to capability, but it's actually how I use it right now. So also all this is more,
right.
It's a bit more.
So one example, just I want to quote here. If you see the existing MOPs, we have storing mode of operation, and then we have storing mode of operation with multicast support. Those use two different MOPs, and I don't see any other way of using it. So if something is mandatory, it will eventually end up taking a new mode of operation. Maybe I've not fully got the gist of what you're trying to say. Maybe we can discuss this offline. But if there are things which have to be mandatorily supported by the 6 LRs, then they go in as a new MOP value altogether. The problem with this approach is you have multiple set. For example, you have multicast support and you have storing mode of operation, and all the permutation, all the combinations will have to become a new MOP value.
Okay, so let's differentiate what goes in the configuration option and what goes in the MOP. So in the configuration option, you can turn something on or off. In the MOP, you are capable of doing it or you don't join the network. So if we want to build a network and we need projected route, then you need to have the bits which you are used to for the storing and non-storing. And you also need to have the bits which say, oh, we are using projection storing and projection non-storing. And that gives you an array of bits in the map. And if you want to join as a router, you need to support all those bits. Otherwise, you don't join or you leave. Kind of. Now, the configuration option, sometimes you don't even know you don't know, right? Because those bits are reserved until they are used. So it's part of the problem is if you don't know that this bit is now meaningful, then you cannot know you don't support it. So you can't use that to say you join or you don't join.
Michael?
All right. So
I'm trying to wait till the end of the slide.
next, so the next thing in this draft is about capabilities, which essentially indicate the set of features, which could possibly mandatory or optional. So the new specs which defines the new capability indicate whether it is mandatory or optional, and the existing draft would provide some recommendations or at least some basic rules as to what have to be minimally specified for every new capability. Now, why MOP by itself is not sufficient? Well, it is pretty much clear that MOP mandates the primitives while capabilities are not mandated. Those can be optional features. And unlike MOP, capabilities can be negotiated. We have a three-way handshake in a form of DIO, DAO, and DAWAC, and capabilities can be sent as part of those messages. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Next slide, please. If I may say, Raul, also a capability is not necessarily a bit, right? For instance, we need for DAO projection the capability to tell the root I can get 100.
Yes,
that's the maximum that you can program.
But do you think that should go in as capability? So every capability might have some additional information that needs to be specified. Now, it's not possible for the capability bits by itself to actually cover all those cases. So I'm assuming once you have the capability options, there will be other sub options depending upon those capabilities.
Exactly. You need to provide the container, and then in the projection, I will provide the sub options. I mean, the TLVs that tell what I need. But you need to try to provide the envelope for it.
Okay, so as of now, the capability options are pretty straightforward. We just have series of bits which are dedicated as capability flags. Each of this capability flag will be defined as a different, I mean, as part of the new specification or as part of any other work. This draft only specifies the capability options, as in the number of bits that have to be carried. Next slide, please. Now the use case for root. Using the capabilities, the root can signal all the nodes in the network what capabilities root support. In the response, you have node sending the DAO responding with its own capabilities, and in the DAO act, possibly root can tell the node whether it is okay to continue with such a capability. The three-way handshake again has to be mentioned as part of the spec which defines a new capability, whether it essentially requires such a three-way handshake, or whether it is okay just to say that I support this and then stop it. It completely depends upon the new capability that has to be supported. Next slide, please. Now this slide is interesting because it allows. So what this slide tells you is there could be 6LR nodes in between who are also which are also sending DIOs, and there are capabilities from the root node and sister nodes which this 6LR receives. Would it be okay for this 6LR to mask some of the capabilities? Because so that is something that is not there in the draft as of now, has not been discussed in the draft as of now, but that certainly seems to be possible. That certainly seems to be technically feasible to handle it in this draft. So yeah, next slide, please.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a very, very interesting question, Howell, because this is not a configuration option. This is very, very different.
Right.
The configuration option cannot be masked at all, cannot be modified at all, because that's the configuration of the DODAG. Now, this one gives capabilities, and for instance, a parent could have maximum 100 children. I don't know. And it might be useful, and we know it's useful, to be able to express number of children you have or number of rods that you have in storing mode, so that people would prefer to join someone else because you're reaching your maximum. In that case, obviously, it seems that some capabilities have to be written or rewritten as you go, right? So certainly the capability is not something that comes from the root. So if you want to have root capabilities, then it's a separate entry that cannot be modified. But then if you have other capabilities, as you propagate them, you have to modify
essentially
them.
what happens is, depending upon the individual capabilities that are defined, the new specs have to tell whether these capabilities can be modified on the intermediate 6LRs. Next slide, please. So some of the other points to work upon is, or some of the other points that I would like to mention here is the capabilities and the MOPs, even though they are as part of the same drafts, are completely exclusive and they are not dependent upon each other. The capabilities can be made use of with existing MOPs as well. It is technically possible to use capabilities with existing MOPs as well. Secondly, the capabilities are going to introduce new control overhead. So would it be possible to elide these capability options if it is not? I mean, it should be possible to not send every DIO message with this capability option. So I'm considering whether a DIO configuration, just like a DIO configuration option, this can be elided or not. Then we have now reducing the control overhead of MOPEX might be more challenging. So I don't know how this can be achieved, but yeah, we are open to any feedback from the working group on how this can be achieved about reducing the control overhead of MOPEX. Next slide, please. So there has been a use case already discussed on the mailing list about the turn-on 6LR RH, and I just wanted to float a proposition here that rather than using a configuration flag for setting the T flag in the DIO configuration option, wouldn't it be more easier or more feasible to handle it as part of the capabilities option itself? so that we don't have to change RFC 6550. This is just something that that I want to float, and this is something that I thought about. Next slide, please. And thank you, Georges, for this for the review. We had made several updates post that. One of the things that is updated is the clarification that MOPEX, if it is absent and if the base MOP suggests that MOPEX should be present, then how it should be handled by the implementation. Secondly, it has been made explicit whether CAP and MOPEX are mutually exclusive, and the detailed INI considerations have been added to the document. Yeah, Michael, that's the end of the slides.
Are they mutually exclusive?
Yes, they
Michael,
are. I mean, I don't have a
Are they
reason to
mutually
believe
exclusive?
that capabilities actually depends upon the MOP.
Well, Michael's here. So mutually exclusive would mean that I couldn't put a CAP and a
You
MOPEX in
couldn't
the same packet.
Put sorry. No.
That's what mutually exclusive would mean, is that I can't put a CAP. And I don't
So
even
what?
if they're orthogonal.
Yeah.
That's
So
what I think you mean.
what I meant was
Separate
that
ideas,
the MOPs.
not that they're mutually.
So you don't have to support a certain MOP to support capabilities as well. You can have capability options and the MOPEX in the same DIO message. That is certainly possible. Okay.
Okay, I think those words are not what you mean.
All right.
I think those are the wrong words, because I think that
Okay.
that would be confusing. But so I have some comments, Michael Richardson here, about this. I'm sorry, going to the end. I did scan through your draft as you started speaking. I hadn't read it before, and I have. First of all, I think it's a very good idea. I think we should immediately adopt it. I don't know if we should split it into a CAP document and a MOPEX document. The pushback is, too many documents, right? As far as I can see, the two concepts are completely independent, right? And maybe one will take longer than the other, or, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe our AD can tell us at some point. I read about the MOPEX that if the MOPEX is 7, if the MOP is 7, then you add the number that you find in the MOPEX to that value. So effectively, you will get numbers in the MOP 0 through 6, and then the first number in the MOPEX will be 0, meaning
That's right.
the MOP is 7, right? And we're basically extending,
exactly how it is.
adding to it. Okay, that's what I understood.
Okay.
Okay, so I think that's a bad idea. I think that we should put, when the MOP is 7, then I think the real MOP is in the MOPEX. And yes, you could put 7 in the MOP and then 2 in the MOPEX, which would get whatever the value 2 was, which is maybe redundant. You'd be stupid to do that. But I think that will be simpler to understand and simpler to code, right? If this number is 7, then the real number is here. I'm using 2 hands that you can't see. Okay, I think that'll be easier and less confusing to code as opposed to adding the 2 things, and someone will get something wrong by putting negative numbers or something like that, or fine extending something. Okay, do you want to respond to that, Pascal?
Yeah, I would like to react on that one, please. I 100% concur with Michael on that one. I wanted to wait for and raise the mic to say that. And also to answer you on the other thing you said is, how do I compress things? Well, because 7 says that the MOP is in the MOPEX, it also means that if you don't have a MOPEX, then you have to wait for the next DIO to know what the MOP is. So you compress it, right? It's kind of obvious once you have adopted Michael's proposal that you can compress the MOPEX or elide it, when you want to elide it, just by saying, hey, it's not there. And 7, if the MOP is not there and you have 7, that means wait for the next DIO to know what the MOP is. That comes with it. It's just
all right.
Natural thing.
Good. I don't know if you have enough. Your question is, do you have too many bips for the MOPEX? Maybe. I don't think the MOPEX should be bit encoded. I think Pascal was thinking, there would be a bit here and a bit there. I think that, yes, we have a a cross product of different kinds of things that we need to do. Not all those cross products will make sense. Okay, having a bit field is hard to compress. Compressing it to an integer for the ones that we care about is probably better for compression. So if you want to use fewer bits, then but give us at least, I would say, 7 to 128 combinations, it's probably good. Okay, and because I don't think that we want to have the testing complexity of having to test devices in 2 to the number of bits possibilities of things. We want to say, well, there was 2 to the 12 bits possibilities. Only 12 of them actually ever make sense in the field. So we have 12 test cases, not 2048. So I think that's an important point.
Yes. Okay. I can buy that, but then I would like to express it not as 2, but as 2.5, meaning the 2 is what's mandatory and the 0.5 is what's optional or something like that. Just I was not very clear on what I wanted to do with this discussion, but what I really want to do is right now the map is all or nothing. And I was thinking, in the case of projection, if I have a node that doesn't do projection, what do I do with this guy? Can he join as leaf? Can he join as nothing? Can he join as router but not preferred?